Hey, Maksym is here. This is the second part of our first ever live audience show that we recorded in Warsaw in late February. The first part is already available publicly as a podcast, but there's a lot of exclusive content specifically for our Patreon family, including behind the scenes videos, the audio messages from our guests, and most importantly, Q&A session that was recorded exclusively for our Patreon sponsors. So if you want to access that, please join our Patreon. You can find all the information on our website, ukrainianspaces.com. Until then, enjoy the second part and let us know what you think. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone, for your awesome questions. We'll have another round of questions as well. Thank you. No apologizing for sharing your thoughts. But I wanted to introduce Alice to you. She is actually here today, arrived today from Ukraine, all the way to be here with all of us. It's also the first time I've met her, and I'm super honored to have her with us. But Alice, if you could introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what you do and yeah, basically anything you'd like to share.
Of course. Hi everyone. I'm really very glad to see you all. And my name is Zhuravel. Yes, I was late because I just arrived from Lviv and it was a little issue in the border. So I'm very glad to share with you maybe some of a short story of my life, just to you could understand me more, my activity more, and also just my occupation maybe, because it's also interesting and also impacted on me for the last year. I was in the creative field all my life. I'm like half creative, half humanitarian, half more science-minded person, and like creative being all my life. I did something with art, design, and everything like this. And before full-scale invasion, I worked with wonderful projects like galleries. I lived in Kyiv, but I'm from Kharkiv. Kharkiv is my native city, yes, it's in Ukraine. And I lived in Kyiv and worked with wonderful Ukrainian projects like galleries or, for example, Ukrainian pavilion in Venice Biennale. I loved it. And I think I had balanced life between myself growing and everything I did was just wonderful. I earned money, I did everything I love, and then full-scale invasion happened, and all my work contracts was ended, unfortunately. But I moved to Lviv, Western Ukraine, and first time like a month maybe after full-scale invasion. I just was volunteer. I did rundown work, volunteer work, of course, not paid, and I tried to do everything I can because I understood this responsibility. This is very unexpected responsibility for young people, and very, very hard and very painful. I started to social work, like researcher, and a humanitarian organization, and we learn like refugee experience, Ukrainian people who came abroad from the war. Like I don't know, this experience just, I can't share it to understand it by your heart and by your soul, but this work made me so strong that I not even going to leave Ukraine, even if it will be something, I hope not, but something very dangerous there. I'm not afraid any kind of rockets or any kind of missiles, you know. I don't care. And I started to analyze the news, and I understood that a lot of Russian propaganda narratives there that impact not to Ukrainians, impact on Western audience and people around the world. And I started to think about why this propaganda working, why this propaganda is so successful and so effective. And I figured out that like main narrative that I hate, this narrative from all this disinformation, this narrative about neo-Nazis in Ukraine and
Ukrainian Nazis, right?
Yes, exactly, and racism in Ukraine, and like person who could be victim if neo-Nazis or racism in Ukraine was in a critical level, and like person who was happy in this country and didn't notice any critical level of these phenomena there, I understood that I can do something like activity, like social initiative to spread another information about Ukraine, and this information will be about diversity, because diversity actually the topic that I was thinking about diversity all the time because I'm not like classic Ukrainian girl, yes, and I have African roots, and my diversity research was all my life, but it was on my personal level, and I didn't share it with wide audience. But this topic exists, and people in Ukraine are really diverse. Historically, people in Ukraine very diverse. Yeah, this is not colorful people like in the United States, but the United States was a colonial country. I mean, they took slaves. Ukraine opposite country. Ukraine was colonized by Russia, so it was impossible to. When I have discussion with English people, and they started to blame Ukrainians, like you have not a lot of colorful people in Ukraine, and not enough colorful people. I don't understand how it's going to be enough or not. Yeah, this is very funny, and I don't understand how it's possible in Ukraine if we was colonized. I mean, like 700 years by Russia. It's impossible, and people just have no critical mind. And I started the discussion, and this discussion was successful. Fortunately, I'm very happy. I'm very happy about it because we don't use any narratives. We don't discuss about the war only. We have, of course, everything about the war because we are Ukrainian and war in our country, and this is very connected. But I mean, we don't discuss about the political topics of Putin or how we hate Russians. We understand we hate Russians automatically. We don't need to discuss about it. We just discuss about our own research, our identities, self-identities, and how we feel in Ukraine, how we was happy. I'm sorry, before the everything like first invasion 8 years ago and this second invasion 1 year ago, or how we want to build our future together, or how we feel about others Ukrainians around us, and I mean other ethnicities, cultures, religions. This is very important.
Yeah, and I want everyone to check the Tozhsamist.com, that's right, the website, because this is part of the work that I love about what you do, and reclaiming the narrative and not saying like, oh, you know, like here, Ukraine is diverse, or here are the number of people of color we have, but actually sharing real human stories with pictures, with beautifully styled photo shoots and everything, when you can see the faces, how beautiful Ukraine in general. So thank you so much for this work as well. I think we have Yulia and Stas. Quick question, Yulia, for you, because you were one of the trailblazers in the beginning when it comes to explaining Ukraine back to the world during genocide through human stories, through your own stories, through stories of people you saw. So can you quickly introduce yourself, but also tell us like why you thought that it's important at that specific time of invasion to reclaim your own stories, not just to care about your loved ones who are in your occupation, but also spend so much time and energy explaining Ukraine back to the rest of the world.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Yulia. We have two Yulias here. Thank you so much for calling me a trailblazer. I think that's a new word. So yeah, just to give you a little bit of context, I studied abroad for almost 5 years. And I moved back after graduating college to Ukraine, kind of like starting to build my adult life in the summer of 2021, and obviously a few months after the whole anxiety around invasion started. And I think for me, who was exposed to a lot of Western intellectual institution, like academic conversation, and just the narratives that exist around Ukraine and Russia abroad, it was always like a question why the Western academic and intellectual canon doesn't perceive Russia as a colonial power. Because I remember even being in some of those classes, like I've taken classes that were discussing a lot of obviously the US colonialism, other ways in countries, but whenever I would try to draw on my experience and experience of my family, generational memories, and introduce this idea into like a classroom that, hey, like Russia is also a colonial power, like, and it still is, and it's still doing a lot of terrible things. People were almost like looking at me sometimes that I'm insane. Like it was such a wild idea, and even if like nobody wanted like to challenge it or respond, like people would just went silent, and the professor would also like just go silent, and he's like, and we move on. So that was like very disappointing always, because I felt like I didn't understand why, like whether like nobody's interested, whether like the Russian soft propaganda is so strong that it's like such a wild idea for them. But yeah, at the beginning,
we're crazy ones.
We're crazy ones that were like dare to use this like idea narrative of colonialism to our like history. I really wanted to just share in simple ways information about what was going on in Ukraine even before the full-scale invasion, because the entire anxiety and a lot of people who were just telling me, oh, just calm down, like nothing will happen. I was just trying to explain that even living in this state of anxiety, whether Russia will invade or not, is not normal, and nobody should have experience in this. And for me, like I saw in the Western media, kind of like what you explained, that first of all, Ukrainians weren't really the one being asked about Ukrainian history, and even a lot of my very educated friends who would send me articles that, like a old white dude, analyst with a Russian studies background would explain why Putin will not invade Ukraine, or why he will invade, and how Ukraine will fall in 3 days. And they would share it with me. I was like, oh, this is such an interesting thought. And I would just read through it, and I was like, but he misses the context completely. He doesn't even he doesn't even ask what Ukrainians think. It's all of this like thoughts around it. And so I felt that was really missing. I felt like people were really focusing on whether Putin will invade or not. There wasn't enough conversation that he invaded in 2014 already, but also there was even less conversation about the generational trauma and the events that our grandparents and great-grandparents and centuries ago like went through. So I really wanted more Ukrainians to start talking about this and introducing this idea that this is not just a new case, and should not, obviously it's a huge shock to everyone that it happened, but for us, it wasn't a shock. It was just reliving that past once again. So yeah, like I just kind of spoke and on social media made a post basically targeted to my international college friends, and somehow it went super viral. And that's how I met Val. But then essentially when invasion started, like a lot of people started coming to my page and just like asking and following what was going on, and I just felt like it was the only thing that was giving me kind of purpose in the first days, because then like a week into a full-scale invasion, my hometown was invaded too, and honestly, yeah, it's a whole blur in my memory, but just speaking to the media, introducing this narrative, speaking on my own pages, speaking to Yulia, because we spoke very early on your podcast, that was very therapeutic in a way.
Thank you. Yeah. It already feels like a therapy session. It goes a long way. Stas, we always leave men, down the line. So, Marichka told a lot about the work that you guys do, which is brilliant and terrific. But separately, we're such a huge fans of how you really clearly explain on your own personal stories of a family that survived through Russification and assimilation, and how your Ukrainian family started speaking Russian. On all those personal stories, you explain how colonialism manifests and what it actually means in normal, real life of people. So, was it always something that these stories you had, or there was some kind of moment of realization when you decided that, okay, now I see it, now I connect the dots?
Yeah, it's working. Hi everyone, I'm Stas. Thank you for having me here. A little bit of background about Ukraine Explainers, how it became the thing. I'm a UX writer, which is a fancy name for a job that is basically involves writing a text that you see when you use apps or software products. And so this job involves a lot of explaining complicated things that go at the other side of the screen, that way that people who use the app don't get confused, which is harder than it sounds, believe me. And so I guess when the full-scale invasion started, I just tried to apply this craft to explain in the most basic terms things that were happening in Ukraine, around Ukraine, that were happening in the past. So yeah, I don't think that there was like a single moment when I realized the things that we're writing about. I think it was a process. The more you try to explain stuff to the outside world, the more you realize that you have questions to yourself about your past, about your own legacy, and the legacy of my family in this case. So I questioned a lot the way my family went through from being Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainian peasants to Russian-speaking Ukrainians living in Kiev. And I think this journey triggered a lot of these personal decolonization moments, because I felt that there's a lot of things that I know about my family, but they're all just vernacular oral knowledge that we kind of share with each other, that I heard from my grandparents. But it was important for me to kind of put it all in a very simple, accessible story that maybe finds some understanding and will resonate with people somewhere else.
I have a little bit of I ask this question sometimes in the podcast, but just quickly to follow up. What was your most shared and most read explainer? Like, what topic did people share the most?
Oh, that's easy. That's about Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, it's always about Nazis in Ukraine, obviously.
Okay. Well, I think we're ready for questions. I can do the walking around this time. I need to stand up.
Okay, so the next part is going to be a quick Q&A for just 10-15 minutes, and this part is going to be recorded only for our Patreon sponsors. It's not going to be included in the public podcast. Please give a round of applause to our panelists. And also thank you so much for Słonecznik to host us. It's very kind of you for providing us this space. Before we close, there was one guest, Buchelnikova, which is a prominent Kazakh researcher of coloniality, and she couldn't make it, unfortunately. So instead, she sent a quote. And I want to close it with it because I think this is one of the most powerful things I've read maybe in months. So she talks about dissolution without decolonization. The wave of decolonization in Africa, in the Middle East, South and Southeast Asia, which started after World War II, was accompanied by rigorous academic discussions and scholarship of colonial legacies and tools of violence. By contrast, in 1991, dissolution of the Soviet Union did not result in similar scrutiny of the Russian imperial legacy. For metropolitan Western Europe and the United States, Europe stood for metropolitanism, a place from which the world was colonized, not a place of colonization. Accepting colonial history with Europe made little sense, so the colonial nature of Russia remained unchallenged. In Russia itself, the dominant narrative was one of victimhood. Russians learned to see themselves as a special nation that sacrificed its own well-being for the sake of non-Russians in the Soviet Union. "Let us stop feeding them" was the slogan of Russians used to explain Moscow's decision to let the colonies go in 1991. Many Western historians perceived it as a regime that erased diverse polities and national movements, but as a political project that created and developed nations. This is highly problematic, not only because it ignores the history of national movements that took place prior to the Bolshevik takeover, but also contrary to the idea of a nation being formed on the basis of popular legitimacy. What the myth of the Soviet Union as a nation builder did was promote in the West the idea that Russia has a sphere of influence, a backyard where it has the right to intervene. There's been some recognition that mistakes were made. But to understand Russia, one needs to listen to those who lived under Russian colonial rule. To understand former and current Russian colonies, one needs to listen to historians from these places and study their cultures, languages, and histories, both written and unwritten. To appreciate the ways out of colonial dictatorships, one needs to study the successful transformations of states like Ukraine that would require dismissing the myth of artificial nation and finally seeing Russia as an empire. Thank you so much for our guests, for our patrons who made this happen and helped us to gather together in Warsaw. And please check Ukrainian Spaces at ukrainianspaces.com. Check our previous episodes as well. And I think I haven't forgotten anything apart from our traditional Slava Ukraini.